Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, welcome in, everybody. It is a Tuesday edition of Sports Daily. You know, we usually call Mondays Reaction Mondays. It's sort of a Reaction Tuesday because we got the start of college basketball for Wichita State, KU, and K-State. And here we go. Jacob Albracht here, joined by Tommy Castor. As always, Jad Chamber producing for us, manning that IHOP hotline. Glad to be here. By the way, IHOP now through Sunday, November 26th. Kids 12 and under can eat free with the purchase of an adult entree. So check that out. We'll have some giveaways on that IHOP hotline today. We'll give away some movie tickets. The new Hunger Games movie, we got a sneak peek to that. Just got that new book from the library, so I'm trying to rip through that before check out that movie. I like the Hunger Games. We'll also give away some HTO tea and coffee. Lots of chances to win. Again, that number 869-1240 on the IHOP hotline. So we will do that throughout the show here today. We have Dan Israel, executive producer of the Chiefs Radio Network, joining us at the top of the hour. What are we at with the Chiefs, Tommy? One touchdown offensively in the last two games, or is it two touchdowns in the last two games offensively? So we'll get into that a little bit with Dan. A lot of what we talked about yesterday and look ahead to the weekend. Well, no, we won't. It's a bye week. We'll look ahead to a long ways away. Long bye for the Chiefs. They need it. So we'll have that. We'll go through these college basketball games, Monday Night Football. A little bit of a flex there by the Chargers, I think. But, you know, the Jets were hanging around. We'll get into that later in the show as well. How are you this morning, Tommy?
Man, I'm good. I'm fired up. We kicked off the college basketball season last night. It was so much fun. I know that, you know, a lot of the games really weren't big, high-profile matchups, but it was so much fun to sit there and flip back and forth from game to game. I think I watched, like, the first half of the Shockers. Then I flipped over to KU when the Shockers were at halftime, then back to Wichita State, and then back to KU. That was fun. And then, of course, Kansas State played a little bit later on. And that was probably the most high-profile matchup, I would say, in the country last night. And USC looked really good. Kansas State, I think, has some questions to answer. But, you know, they hung in there for the most part, made it a game late. But, man, it was fun. It was great to jump back into college basketball.
2 wins and a loss. And remember, that was USC without Bronny James, who was a top recruit. They're probably going to be pretty good. We'll get into that one. You heard it here, our first Jayhawk basketball game here on KFH's, the flagship station of K-State Athletics this year for the first time. So we're excited about that. Let's start with the Shockers, Tommy. I think the most questions coming in, we're also, of course, here at Odyssey, the flagship station of Wichita State Athletics. The Shockers are, to me, you know, the most unknown of the three teams. I mean, we obviously know KU is going to be really, really, really good. And thank you last night for alleviating any concern people had from the preseason. We'll get into that in a little bit. We know K-State's going to be scrappy. We have a decent idea, I think, of K-State's floor. Wichita State, we don't know anything. Like, new coach, new players, all of this. And I thought that was about as good of an opening performance as you could have hoped for. It was a weird game, right? And like they didn't dominate statistically like you might imagine in a game where they were able to win by 17 points. They didn't shoot it particularly well, especially from 3-point, just 23%. They turned the ball over 10 times. You know, they dominated the boards. And they defended really well. And Lipscomb missed a lot of shots they probably should have hit too. But I do want to give the Shockers defense some credit. But I thought, you know, all things considered, Tommy, that was about as good as we could have hoped for. And, you know, I don't know if he let up in the second half, but Colby Rogers was incredible in the first half. And then the bigs. It's the bigs, Tommy. Like, the identity of this team, it's so funny. We wondered because, you know, Paul Mills has had these high-octane, fast-paced offenses in the past with some incredible guards over the years. And it feels to me, one game in, so, you know, we can talk to Kevin Saul about this tomorrow. But it feels like the strength of this team and the uniqueness of this team is going to be its size. And they dominated the boards last night. They were blocking shots all over the place, 5 blocks on the night. But the size of this team is going to be really interesting to see because it is a little unusual when they run out Poto and Ballard, and their guards even have some size. So I thought that was probably the thing that stood out to me.
You're going to jump all over me for this, and I think that other people might as well. I know that you can't overreact from one game. And I don't like talking in hyperbole, but honestly, I don't think that this is. After watching the game last night, I don't think that there's any reason why the Shockers can't compete for an American Conference championship this season, right? Like I honestly, from watching them, it might take a little bit of time for them to gel. They need to shoot the ball a little bit better. As you mentioned, the percentage from three wasn't great, but how fast this team plays, the pace at which they keep it up, it's exciting, an exciting, fast-paced brand of basketball. And with just the talent that, these guys have, it was our first time seeing Colby Rogers, and he was incredible, especially in the first half. And so I think that if that can keep up, and then of course with the size that you mentioned, Isaac Abide off the bench was outstanding. Also, I like his energy coming in off the bench. I'm not sure that he's somebody that I would necessarily start in the 5-man rotation, but I love the energy he brings off the bench. Man, at this point, I know it's extremely early, but from what I saw last night, this is a team that in my mind can and should compete for a conference championship.
Lipscomb's 208 in the Ken Palm, just for reference's sake. I don't, I think that's an overreaction. Memphis and Florida Atlantic are way up there, I would think now. But after that, I would agree. So if you're going to tell me
compete for a conference championship,
well,
I'm not saying
again,
win a conference championship. I'm saying they should be up in the top echelon competing to win an American Conference championship.
Top echelon is fine because I think that I've put it at sort of top 4 or 5 as the goal this year anyway. So I've already been there. But I mean, FAU could be really, really, really good. So when we say compete for FAU may roll through the conference. They're good enough to do that. They should be. Memphis,
they're a veteran team. They're returning basically everybody. Dusty May is one of the great coaches.
Let's see Penny get it done on the court, not just in recruiting, right? So Memphis, I won't say anything about Memphis, but we know FAU is going to be good. So I don't know. The other thing is Lipscomb isn't very good, and Lipscomb missed a lot of open looks. So I don't want to overreact to it, but the hyperbole for me is that was about as good as it could have possibly been for the Shockers in game 1. All things considered, that was great. Like it was exactly what we wanted to see. They played a brand that we like right here with the energy and everything. The intensity was high. I think that, Xavier Bell ran the point for the most part. That's going to still be the thing to watch. Harlan Beverly, who came over from Miami, turned the ball over 5 times. They can't have that. He had five turnovers, 5 points. But that's going to take some time, and I know they're going to live with a lot of that early, just to try to find where guys fit. We certainly saw the rotation, and again, this is all I don't think Bijan Cortez is going to make it back based on anything that you've seen. If he does, that obviously changes things too. But you kind of saw quickly was a 7-man rotation. Jacob Germany gave him some minutes, and he'll be important because I think they need to rotate him in. But I think we saw a lot of what we're going to see. And the other interesting thing, in the reason we probably, in fairness to the opponent in the situation, is remember that they had all the Greece games, they had all this time that other teams haven't had. They may explode out of the gates here, and I've always thought this was possible. It's, by the way, as a quick aside on college basketball, if you're a bettor, I feel like betting early college season basketball is a lot of fun to do because you got to think about it. Like Vegas has to try to keep up with the NFL, with college football. The NBA just started. As an aside, they put Dickinson's threes last night, Tommy, over under at 1. Like, I don't know what that's based on, but certainly not based on anything we've seen or expect. McCullough was at 1.5. McCullough's points were at 13.5. He's going to be their leading scorer most likely this year, he or Dickinson. But it's like, what is happening? Wichita State was the same way. It was like, man, 7 points against Lipscomb, that seems like a great opportunity because we know Wichita State's had all this extra time to practice.
Right.
In the preseason. They're almost certainly gonna come out of the gates hot. It's really interesting. It's really interesting to watch college basketball stuff and watch the swings too. So we can talk to Chelsea about that later in the week. It was a good betting night for me. I think it was a good betting night. I didn't talk to anybody that didn't do fairly well in betting college basketball last night because
it was good.
You can just sort of stick to what you know, right? And the good thing for us is we have 3 teams that we know pretty well. And it's like, okay, well, we'll just stick to that. Anyway, so Wichita State is a 7-point favorite, looked really good. Wichita State, to play a defensive game looked fairly good. But we do need to see him shoot the ball better, Tommy, bottom line. 3 for 13 from three is not going to cut it. They were good from the field, but not good from 3. It has been the elephant in the room for Wichita State for a long time. They didn't take very many, though. And that's the other thing I want to point out. Look, they weren't falling, so they stopped taking. And we've seen some of these teams in the past just keep firing away, and that has driven fans nuts to see that. If they're not falling, just to keep going and keep going and keep going. They didn't do that last night. They weren't falling. They just stopped taking them. 13 threes in a game of college basketball today. I mean, that's nothing.
Well, the issue, I think, in years past was that they didn't really have any other option, right? There weren't a lot of other, guys, at least down low, that they could get the ball to try to, get high efficiency shots off. I had a realization as I was watching the game last night that, there were stretches, and I think a lot of it relates to the 3-point shooting that you just talked about, but there were stretches in previous years where, as we all know, offensively, the Shockers would just disappear. They would just go away. Like, there would be long stretches where there was no offensive output, long stretches where it felt like the energy level was down, where it felt like the intensity level was down. You could never really pinpoint when it was going to start and then when it was going to let up. And I had this realization as I'm watching the game, okay, this is a completely different era of Shocker basketball. And if there's one thing that Paul Mills has preached since he started on the job and then throughout the offseason, going to Greece, all of that, is this team is going to play with intensity. And the energy level is going to be there from start to finish. And, I think that a lot of that comes down to conditioning. A lot of that comes down to, how these players are getting ready for the season. And it hit me. I'm like, okay, we're going to see a team that is going to get after it from start to finish. There aren't going to be lots of lapses of time where there just isn't any energy. And you know what? They might have had trouble shooting from 3 last night. But to your point, at least they adapted. At least they went elsewhere. They went down low to guys like Quincy Ballard and Isaac Abide and Kenny Poto, who didn't have a great shooting game, but still, like, they had other options to be able to get the ball to other than just continuing to launch threes. I think that one key is going to be how well do guys like Xavier Bell and Quincy Ballard, who didn't get a ton of minutes last season, how are they going to grow into being some primary key components of this team? I mean, it looks like they're going to be leaned upon quite a bit, both of those guys. So how do they step up from a reserve role a year ago into that starting rotation? I think they did a good job in night 1.
They did. If they rebound, if they win the rebounding battle that way, most nights, they're going to win a ton of games. They just will. If you can dominate the boards like that, you're going to win games. And that is probably, if I had to point out one thing, it's that size, and that's it. Like, if it's their ability to block shots and rebound, it's interesting to see it. And again, it's Lipscomb. Don't want to overreact to Lipscomb. We'll see if that translates through and continues to happen. And how do those guys rebound against a team like K-State, against KU? Well, that's going to be when we get the real test. But until you play those kinds of teams, Wichita State should dominate the boards in most games, and that will give them a chance to win. Isaac Abide was one of the better storylines of that night, Tommy.
Yeah, he was great.
Dude's always been a high-level athlete, and you can see that. But I'm not sure anybody saw that coming last night. That was pretty impressive. And, that gives them a little bit more depth at that position, right? To play, sort of a 3-4, whatever you want to call it. But, he was making big time plays and threw in 5 rebounds while he was at it. So I think that we saw so much of what we're going to want to see from this team. They're clicking early, right? The identity of this team seems pretty clear. It's what we would guess the identity would be based on the roster, right? When you've got 2, tall towers down there, take advantage. Right. Most teams can't, they don't have that anymore.
I also had a thought that in an alternate universe, what would this program look like right now if Colby Rogers had been able to play last year? If he had been able to get out there and play, because we might not see Paul Mills as the head coach of Wichita State basketball. In his first game for the Shockers, I mean, Colby Rogers was great in the first half.
He was great.
Cooled off a little bit in the second half, but man, he was unconscious, shooting lights out in the first half. And I just thought, man, like had he been able to get on the court a year ago, we might be looking at a completely different timeline of Shocker basketball. Also, though, I mean, just a credit to Paul Mills for keeping these guys on the team, keeping them on the roster in the world of the transfer portal. Colby Rogers, I know that he'd moved around a couple different times, so that might have been prohibitive for him. But Rogers and getting Kenny Poto back to the team and bringing back Quincy Ballard and Xavier Bell, that's going to play a big role, I think, in the way that they move forward.
Tommy, what's crazy? Okay, the starting 5 featured 1 new player, Harlan Beverly. Otherwise, it was 4 returners. And the next biggest contributor was another returner. The 5 returners led the way for the Shockers last night.
And isn't that what we talked about all last season, was that the talent was there? Like they were there.
Well, look, again, one game against Lipscomb. Let's see if it continues. But I think it's fair to say that was as good as we've seen a B-Day play. We didn't get to see Ballard. He was hurt. That's another what if kind of a question. We didn't get to see Rogers because of his situation. There's no question Xavier Bell played better last night. No question, right? And Kenny Poto didn't have a good shooting night, but he also had 11 boards and was pretty good defensively. So that is going to become the interesting part of this early season, is that last night it was the returners that led the way. It wasn't the new faces and new players. And that's really interesting.
But, and I know that again, we're at least I'm doing it. I'm making a big deal out of one game. But a year ago, it was through 2 games, and the Shockers were 1-1 after losing to Alcorn State, and the sky was falling, right?
Sure.
And so, like, I think that you can.
No, I want to give them credit.
Right. I think it's okay to, and again, like, it might be hyperbole for me to say after one game, I think they can compete for a conference championship. But from everything that I saw from start to finish, yeah, again, they didn't shoot the ball great, but it didn't seem like that was, like a shooting epidemic that would last the entire season. To me, it just looked like, okay, the shots weren't long. So they went and tried something else, but the intensity level remained. And so that was something that I feel like is beneficial for them. I mean, think of a night when the shots do fall for them.
Well, we've had PTSD waiting for nights where the shots start falling.
Yeah.
Okay. Like that, fool me once, fool me twice, all that stuff, because we've been waiting on that to happen since Etienne's freshman year, probably. I mean, since then, shots just haven't been falling. And so we do want to see that. But if they don't, you've still got to go out and win games. And if they can rebound that way, guess what? You get lots of easy chances, right? Like second chances in basketball. So it was a really nice performance. Shocker fans, 869-1240. What did you think? Let us know. You can call into the IHOP hotline and hit us with your thoughts on the game last night. When we come back, KU, I was getting nervous. Look, I'm going to be honest, and it's all relative, right? I was nervous because they didn't look good in the Illinois preseason game or the exhibition, whatever you want to call it. And they didn't look fantastic either in the other one. Boy, they did last night, though. We'll talk about it. KU rolls. I got to be honest. I talk about college basketball betting. The one I missed was I took the 30.5 points. And that was done in about 3 minutes into the game. I'm like, oh, they're not going to cover that number.
They covered 30 midway through the first quarter or the first half.
Yeah, that was the only miss I had. But I all the player props for that game just were screaming at me last night. We'll talk about the Jayhawks, what we saw in that opener, next on Sports Daily.
869-1240.
Time to get busy.
This is Sports Daily on KFH.
All right, welcome back in, everybody. Sports Daily here on KFH. By the way, the Shockers in action again on Thursday against Western Kentucky. The Hilltoppers, at least if we look at early Ken Palm, not expected to be great. They're not very high early on. If I kind of was just during the break looking at some of the early season opponents, the preseason. Western Kentucky, not expected to be a good opponent. Coastal, not expected. Furman or Liberty, who they'll play in that holiday tournament, the Myrtle Beach. Those teams both look like they are expected to be pretty good. And then, of course, Mizzou, K-State, Kansas. I think it was South Dakota State. Decent. There's some opportunities in the non-con for sure for Wichita State to get a test there. We got an email into the show there from somebody, saying it was good to hear the acknowledgement for IB's recruits. And certainly, IB's recruits were great last night, and Paul Mills is going to need those guys to be great. And we'll see. I'm interested to see which of the new players really steps up and, steps into a big role. We certainly expected that out of Bijan Cortez as much as anybody else because of the need at the position. But look, Xavier Bell, like, how great a story is that going to be, Tommy? That's a local guy. Like, we root for that stuff as much as anything. But Wichita State wins. They'll play again on Thursday against Western Kentucky. And on Sunday, it's a 3-game week this week. The Sunday game is Friends, is that game against Friends. So KU, Tommy, like I was legit. I'm not going to say I was concerned like for the season because I'm not. I love this roster. I think this roster has a chance to be hands down the best defensive team in the country. But I was concerned with the way they were playing in the preseason. There's no question about that. Boy, if that, whatever it took, that was what we would have expected, a flawless KU opener to look like, essentially. I mean, they crushed them. And it was just immediate, and it was smothering, and the Stars did exactly what they needed to do. And if Kevin McCullough and Hunter Dickinson shoot like that from 3 most nights, 7 of 10, it's going to be lights out for the opposition because they're going to defend like nuts. DeJuan Harris Jr. doesn't take a dadgum shot.
He doesn't need to. He didn't.
I feel like he's just messing with us sometimes. Doesn't even attempt one. Doesn't take a shot. But he had 10 assists. Nick Timberlake shot the ball well. I mean, that's really it. Like, we know that Dickinson will be an offensive force down low. KJ Adams is going to have KJ Adams will look like he did 2 years ago offensively. A lot of dunks, a lot of easy buckets. If Dickinson, McCullough, Timberlake, and we'll see what Elmarco Jackson does. He's a freshman, so it's going to be slow going. But if those other 3 shoot the 3 well, Tommy, KU will be able to match their offense up to that defense, which I think their defense, again, I think it's going to be the best defense in the country. But, man, and they're not going to shoot like that every night. But really, what do you think they'll need? One of those guys to be hot from 3 each night, and they'll be okay? Because DeJuan Harris to Dickinson and or KJ Adams is going to create easy offense most nights. It's just like icing on the cake if they can shoot it that way.
Well, I think the first thing that they need to do is at least consider moving Nick Timberlake into the starting rotation in place of Elmarco Jackson. And, you mentioned Elmarco Jackson being a freshman. He looked like it. I mean, he looked kind of overwhelmed. He was the only one, I think, on that roster that didn't really look like he was comfortable. And how could you be as a freshman starting your first game inside of Allen Fieldhouse? Timberlake came off the bench and shot the ball really well. I'd like to see him start moving forward. But you know what? Going back to your original point, I was never concerned about the Jayhawks, even after the exhibition game against Illinois, even after the exhibition game against Fort Hays State. I was never really concerned about
with Arterio Morris getting kicked off the team. Really? Like,
yeah, I mean, of course that's a concern, but I was never concerned.
Lot of stuff that was just like, what is happening here?
The thing about it, like, you have to keep in mind,
concern relative
those
to the
2
expectation.
Games, but again, like, I don't think you can judge expectations on 2 games that don't matter. On 2 games that don't matter at all to the standings, right? Like, why in the world would you, and I'm not saying you don't have the effort in exhibition games, you clearly do, but I don't know how. It's kind of in the same way, like we were just talking in the last segment, it's hard to like set big time expectations off of your first regular season game. It's even harder to set expectations based off of 2 exhibition games, one against a Division II school. So I never had concern.
It's relative. It's relative to the expectation of this team. And to say
in exhibition games,
well, exhibition games and Arterio Morris's situation. The thing is, like, the reason I love this, and look, my money's where my mouth is. I've got KU winning the title, and I've backed it up with my wallet. I just when you have as much experience coming back as they do, right? I mean, that's as much a key to this team as anything, is you return 60% of the starting lineup and you add Hunter Dickinson. You shouldn't start slow. And so when we saw them,
but they
sort
didn't
of stumble
through their exhibition games that don't matter.
And late night at the Fog, where we know Bill Self was really disappointed in them. Well, Bill Self cares because he said it. He said, like, he's not been pleased with the way they've been playing. Clearly, they responded and everything's fine now.
I mean, you flip
But
the lights on in Allen Fieldhouse on opening night when the game actually does matter to your overall record, and they roll through North Carolina Central. It doesn't mean that things were perfect leading up to this game, but I was never concerned big picture with the expectations of this Jayhawks team. The other thing to keep in mind is that when you are preseason number one, there is nothing you can do for the most part other than disappoint and let down that ranking, right? When you come in, like, there's nowhere higher up to go. You're number one. You can't go any higher than that. So everything is going to be looked through the lens of, are they playing like a preseason number one? It's November 6th. Like, let's take a breath here for a second. Everything is perfectly fine. I would be so much more concerned if they get through half of the non-conference and they start to stumble, or they don't look dominant. They don't look good. Things are not good with Hunter Dickinson, for example, or the shooting isn't there for Kevin McCullough, or whatever the case might be. But I'm not going to overreact over exhibition games.
You're mischaracterizing, number one, what I said. I didn't say the sky is falling for KU. I said
you were concerned about the Jayhawks.
I said I had some concern about the way they
games.
played in the exhibition. I did. The same guys dominated the minutes. Essentially the same rotation that we saw last night lost to Illinois in an exhibition. I mean, it's not like they weren't trying.
And
that is a little bit like what, Tommy, I mean, that very easily could have been a regular season game. Like,
but it wasn't
an obscure game.
It was a charity game. It was a charity game.
But it happened. Okay, and that's all we had to go off of. And then it's not like they followed it up with an amazing performance. And what did they do in their off-season tournament? Didn't they lose a game there? Yeah, they did. And I know that was to NBA guys, but there was enough little stuff between that loss and Bill Self being furious at late night in the fog and losing the Illinois exhibition game when you played your starters, and then, kind of slogging through a Fort Hays State exhibition. And Arterio Morris's situation happens to say, well, this is weird. Like, this doesn't seem like, it's certainly not what I expected to see in the preseason. And then they backed it up and everything's fine. And we saw exactly what we needed to see last night. So yeah, I think it's fine to have paused a little at what we'd seen up until last night. And then last night they just flexed it out and it's fine. I mean, they have the ability to be as good. I think they have the ability to be as good as that Doak and Dot team was. I mean, that level of good and dominant and just crush people as that team was. And we hadn't seen them play that way in any capacity yet. And I just imagine if Arterio Morris was on this team. I mean, holy moly. But, whatever. I don't think they need him. But now, like we saw last night, that again, I really think that's their ceiling, to be that good. Like I don't know, Tommy, 2, 3, 4 loss type team or better, because all of that experience is back. It's not like they just have the talent. They've got older, experienced players, 60% of whom have been with Bill Self now for 3 years. This team has a chance to be one of the better teams we've seen. It really does. And I don't know what that means for the Big 12, because Houston looked really good. Like, the Big 12 is going to be the grind that it is. But man, if things, go the way they can and go well, this could be an all-time team, I think.
And for all of the reasons that you just mentioned, that's why I never had any concern about what happened in the preseason at all, because they've got great returners. They've got the best transfer in America in Hunter Dickinson coming in, the best point guard in America in DeJuan Harris. And oh, by the way, the best coach in America in Bill Self. I was never concerned about what happened in a couple of exhibition games and late night in the fog. Never really concerned about it. I will say the one thing, though, after the game last night that I thought about a little bit, that it's not even really a concern yet for me necessarily. It's more just something I think to keep our eyes on. They're fairly thin. Like, Bill Self played an 8-man rotation, and part of that was because Jamari McDowell was injured in practice last week, so he didn't play. But they're fairly thin after their starting 5. I want to see Johnny Furphy get more minutes, and he's still getting acclimated to the program and all of that.
Raise your hand if you ever heard of Johnny Furphy before last night. I didn't. I
You'd never heard of Johnny Furphy?
No, everyone's like the Australian Grady Dick, and I
Yeah.
just totally missed the boat on Johnny
Because
Furphy.
he's new. Like he joined the team. I think he reclassified into this season, joined the team like a month ago or like a month and a half ago. Like he's not been with the team for very long. And he's somebody that I think could potentially work his way into the starting rotation, maybe in that number 2 spot.
Bill Self thinks so too. He played him
That's going to
17
be,
minutes last night.
that's going to be the only position that's going to be in flux a little bit. Is I don't think it's Marco Jackson's job.
No,
I think Nick
it's not.
Timberlake is probably the guy that right now should be the starter, but I wouldn't be
It doesn't
surprised to
matter.
see Johnny Furphy slide right in there.
It doesn't matter who starts in that spot. It's totally irrelevant. Doesn't matter because that spot's not going to be at. You know who it will probably be, Tommy, is whoever defends the best. That would be my guess. Because they just don't
I
need
also
that.
wonder, like, and we saw Parker Brown have some minutes last night and looked fairly good doing it. But I mean, there's a pretty big drop off when Hunter Dickinson goes to the bench. You know, what happens in a game when Hunter Dickinson gets into foul trouble? You know, it's going to be Brown, right? But there is a decent drop off, I think.
Don't forget that KJ Adams played the 5 last year. I mean, that's
true.
You know, when they brought in Dickinson, all I thought about, I mean, obviously Dickinson's great, but we know like everything about Dickinson is right there. There's not going to be any surprises. What it made me think about was what it does for KJ Adams. One, it helps him go back to the 4 where he thrived on the national championship team.
Right.
But 2, it, you know, to me, it was like, well, wait a minute. Now you've got Adams there, who's a freak athlete, who's going to be able to play every minute of every game if he needs to. He can play either position. If Dickinson gets into trouble, they've got, and I think this is why they're comfortable with Zach Clemens' red shirt, is because they've got KJ Adams to play both spots if they need to. I mean, Brown will obviously help too, because he looked pretty good. I want to see Brown against some big-time opponents and see how that translates. I don't know how concerned about the depth I am because Bill Self's had amazing teams where he only played like 6 guys. Like we've seen that work for them before, and I think they'll be okay. And again, don't want to overreact to what we saw them do against North Carolina Central either, because that was like a 1 versus 16 game where the 16 like had a lucky shot to win their conference tournament. Right? It looked like an opening round NCAA tournament game. But the things that for me that make me love the prospects of the Jayhawks this year all played themselves out last night. They're not going to shoot from 3 that way every night. Let's be real. But it doesn't matter if they defend the way they can.
So DeJuan Harris, we talked about it at the top. 0 points, 0 of 0 field goals, 10 assists. He had an Instagram story that he posted where it was the caption was basically said, "They be like, shoot, I will when I need to, winky face." So, I mean, he doesn't feel the pressure to do that. I don't feel the pressure for him to do that. I know that
it won't be there.
You said it a few different times that, for this team to be as great as they can be, he needs to shoot the ball more. He will when they need him to.
And don't misunderstand either. I don't mean as a shooter. I don't mean to sit out there and rip threes. I mean to drive to the basket and try to create. He's got 2 of the best post players in the country there to crash the boards. Like, just drive in, take your layup, and give him a shot is what I mean. And I still believe that. Their ultimate ceiling offensively is with him as a creator. Now, over his lifespan as a Jayhawk, he doesn't do that consistently, and there's far less pressure for him to do that this year than there was last year. So it's not going to be like, what was it last year? The DeJuan Harris auto bet was like over 8 points or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not going to be that way this year because there will be a lot of games like last night because he is so comfortable not shooting. All right, 869-1240 on the IHOP hotline. On the way out, let's do HTO first. Which means our movie tickets will come in the second hour. But let's give away some iced tea and some coffee. HTO available. More than 25 flavors of iced tea you can get your hands on either at the west or east location in Wichita or in Derby. And we'll give you a coffee card, an HTO Brewhouse free card as well. That'll come to you in Derby and at the east location in Wichita. Good luck, everybody. First caller on the IHOP hotline, 869-1240. We'll come back. More Sports Daily. Hit on the Wildcats and the lost USC next. Congratulations, Chris, for the win on the HTO iced tea and coffee on us here at Sports Daily. We'll give away some movie tickets coming up in the next hour. All right, Tommy, K-State USC. K-State was a little outgunned last night. Pretty simple. They didn't play well offensively. It felt like they really struggled to get offense going. Tyler Perry picked it up in the second half, but he was ice cold. In the first half, Kaluma didn't play well at all. 4 turnovers, just 1 of 11 from the court. He is an interesting physical presence out there, though. Look, David Gasson looked pretty good. I mean, that one was pretty simple. On November 6th, USC looked like a better team than K-State. And that's because USC, I think, has a chance to be pretty dang good.
Yeah, I think USC is a better team than Kansas State right now. And you know what? Right. I mentioned it before. I think it's going to take a little bit of time for this team to gel, right? And figure out exactly their place, because you're combining 2 incredibly touted transfers in Tyler Perry and Arthur Kaluma with some returners like Cam Carter and David Gasson and others. So how in the world do they all gel together? If there's any coach that I would want to work on gelling this team together, it'd probably be Jerome Tang, because that's what he's great at. He's great at getting teams to come together and play together and work well together. He's really good at that sort of thing. But it's a tall task in your very first game of the season against a top 25 team to expect them to do that. And so, I think that it's a credit to Andy Enfield's squad at USC. I think is going to be pretty solid this season. They just look like the better team. I think it's flat out just as simple as that.
Yeah, it is. And look, K-State's going to have a chance to come back and feel better pretty quick. They get Bellarmine and then South Dakota State. I don't think this is one of those years where South Dakota State's supposed to be very good, like really good. But we'll see on that. It's too early. Providence, though, in a couple weeks, and that's a roadie. That right. Providence is supposed to be pretty good, like tournament good for sure. So that'll be probably a better, that's sort of the one I've been looking to, is like, okay, let's see them against that kind of a team and see what they do.
I just want to say also, credit to Kansas State and Jerome Tang for playing probably the most difficult game of the entire college basketball slate last night. Right. You've got all these teams that are playing bye games, and like Michigan State lost a bye game to James Madison last night. They're a top 5 team in the country and they lost. Right. Like, so, I mean, there are a lot of these programs that are playing basically nobodies for the most part. And Kansas State, I mean, it's a neutral court, but they go to Vegas and they play a top 25 team. So credit to them for scheduling that when not a lot of other teams did that.
They, you got to remember too, when that game was scheduled, you would have had one of the more highly viewed college basketball games in a long time, I think, had Bronny James played. So there was strategy in that too. Very smart. I loved it. Loved that they did that at the time. And, maybe they have Naquan Tomlin and maybe they thought they could take a swing while on that big platform. Now, that all has fallen apart with, Bronny James' medical condition and then Naquan Tomlin being off the team. But it was still, like they still got it. And look, I thought it was pretty apparent that they were outmatched offensively at this moment, and they hung in there for a long time.
They did. They got it back. They got it back to, I think, within 8 in the second half.
Yeah.
And Tyler Perry started making shots in the second half, which was good. And they're going to be okay, right? Like, I think they're going to be fine. It's a tough stage, a tough test to kick off the season when you're trying to gel a team of transfers and returners, and you're playing a top 25 team on a neutral court to kick off your season.
If I had any long-term concern, it would be, where does the offense come from when it's not going to be Tyler Perry? He's going to score a ton of points. That's like early in the year. That's what I think I'll watch more than anything with them, is how do they create offense when it's not him? And we'll see. That Providence game, I think, is the one to circle to be a really good litmus test for K-State. All right, 869-1240 on that IHOP hotline. Joining us on it when we return at the top of the next hour, executive producer of the Chiefs Radio Network, Dan Israel. Looking forward to that conversation. Man, it is fascinating right now in the AFC. We'll be right back.
Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
Caught! Touchdown! Kansas City!
Hey, Chiefs Kingdom, we have you covered. Joining Sports Daily Live, executive producer of the Chiefs Radio Network, Dan Israel.
I'm actually in Heidelberg, Germany. I'm taking advantage of the bye. So, guten Morgen to you, guten Tag to us, but good to be with you guys. You know what? There's no shortage of beer here, that's for sure, man. Well, I think you're exactly right, Jacob. I really think, for the Chiefs and the AFC in general, it shows a little bit what Miami looks like against a real defense. I felt like the Chiefs defense, save the third quarter, played really well. To hold Tyreek Hill to just 64, I think it was 64 yards, 8 catches, something like that. That's an impressive feat. No matter who's playing them, I feel like that's not easy to do. I said on the air, Tyreek was going to probably get 100. You just got to keep him you got to keep him from going to the end zone 3 or 4 times, right? But so I do think for Miami Dolphins, it goes to show, man, this isn't going to be it's not going to be just an easy walk through the AFC, despite putting 70 up on the Broncos. You're not going to do that on a good team. And I thought it was for the Chiefs a chance to really say, to kind of return to their identity. I felt like the first half, they looked very good. They were moving the football. I think Miami had something to say about it in the third quarter, and I think partly, that's what happened. And Mahomes had an uncharacteristic fumble that I don't think he would have, normally. But I feel like in general, the Chiefs are able to say, look, we can play anybody in the AFC. It's going to be a tough road because we got a lot coming. We got the Eagles on Monday night. We've got the Bills and Bengals. I mean, it's going to be a tough road, but I think they can hang on a good team, on a good offense. That defense is that good, is what I feel like. You can take from that game alone, if not the entire season. The Broncos game is really the anomaly here. Yeah, Tommy, I think you're right. I feel like that, I don't want to say it would fall on deaf ears with Coach Reed because he's not that kind of coach, but I definitely think they want it to be balanced. I don't think they ever see themselves or ever going to see themselves as a run-first team. I think they are a pass to enable the run, which is kind of backwards to what we see most of the time in the NFL, where you run to enable the pass. But I just think that's Coach Reed's identity. I think it's where he excels is the passing game. But you're absolutely right. They have a talent in Isaiah Pacheco that, when you talk about stalwart running backs and you talk about, hanging your coat on one hook, man, this kid can do it. And I feel like if they don't take advantage of that, that'll be a shame. I think the last thing they want to do is lose a game because they're not taking advantage of their running capabilities. I think the weird thing about this is I feel like you telegraph to the other team when you put Jerick McKinnon back in there, you telegraph to the other team, we're gonna pass now, because Isaiah is so dangerous at 5.5 a carry or whatever it is now. When he's in there, they have to respect the run. They just have to. And so I hope going forward they continue to push that. It's a little different just internally in the organization without Eric Bieniemy, because he was such a proponent of the running game. But I don't think that Coach Reed is going to completely be lost on the fact that 16-1 is a pretty good stat, right? That's not 8-9. That's not 9-8. That's 16-1. That's pretty impressive. Yeah, Jacob, I agree. Well, we've become accustomed to being such a potent, prolific offense that, we can hang 30 and 35 on teams. And it's just so interesting to be a team that can, you look back to the Denver game, to be 4 turnovers in and still 1-score game just goes to show how incredible this defense is. And it's just kind of hard to roll your identity over to that, or to roll what we as fans expect. But I do think you're right in that the defense will keep you in every game here. The offense only has to just refine what they're doing. And the better they get and the more they return to maybe what we've seen in years past, I do think it'll be more run balanced, more than we've seen ever. I think they understand that Isaiah is a phenomenal back and an impressive running back. And so I feel like they will continue to kind of push that envelope. And look, Travis Kelce's in every game, right? I mean, I just don't see him ever abandoning that part of it. But the rest of the guys, I did think here in Germany, I thought Sky Moore looked better. It's the first time I really thought, Sky kind of had moments in the game. And so that was exciting to see. But if they can continue that push, if they can continue to just take these small steps forward while this defense keeps us in games, I think what we can as fans expect to see by the end of the season is a really, really balanced football team that's kind of like the Patriots of old, where they play great defense and they're great on offense. Every time they touch the ball, they get every possession they're scoring somewhere. And so, man, how fun is the postseason going to be with a team like that? Yeah. Yeah, I think the recovery speed and the physicality that our secondary plays with is really phenomenal right now. When you look at it, look, we're banged up in linebackers, right? And you really didn't see. I didn't think Chris Jones was he wasn't a dominant force against Miami here in Germany. It was the secondary, and I think they play fast. I think they play hard. McDuffie punched that ball out from Tyreek, and their ability to improvise was shocking to me, because, you start lateraling that ball around and dangerous things can happen, especially when you're only 20 yards from the Miami end zone. I just feel like that's a dangerous thing, but they're very confident in the way they play. For being so young, I don't know where they get this confidence. but man, it's fun to watch. I mean, they're just so physical, and the recovery speed that they can keep up with guys as fast as Tyreek Hill and Justin Jefferson, and the AFC West is stacked with these guys, and I feel like if they can hold their own with them, they don't have to draw these silly penalties all the time, and they really put pressure on the quarterback. I feel like there's no receiver in the league that they can't defend. I mean, I don't know who it would be. In the top of my mind was Tyreek Hill, and they did a great job. Yeah, Jacob, you're right. I mean, I feel like that, a Super Bowl rematch generally doesn't favor the winner of the Super Bowl. It generally favors the team that lost, right? There's just so much emotion to it. But I feel like with the Eagles, one of the things they do so well is they're methodical with the tush push and everything. They keep drives alive. I feel like with the physicality of our defense, I'm really excited to see, because frankly, I know this is a better defense than what we had in Arizona in the Super Bowl. And so to watch them again in what might be not only the Super Bowl rematch, but a prognostication to the Super Bowl this year, I think it's going to be both challenging but enlightening to us to see how this thing unravels. Because look, I think the danger in teams like the Bills and the Bengals is Jamar Chases and the Stephon Diggs, these guys that can take the top off your defense. Well, our secondary's proven they can hang with that. And so then what you've got, and we know the defensive line, we know what we got in Chris Jones and with Charles Omenihu now on there, I feel like the defensive line is really solid. So they're going to be able to play the run and pressure the quarterback well. But how will we stack up against an offense that's got a unique kind of physicality to them? The tush push really represents more than just, to me, getting a first down. It represents how physical, when the Eagles offensive line wants to move you, they do it. And so I'm anxious to see how the linebackers operate under that. And this year, how the entire defense plays them. And I think we got to give a lot of credit to Steve Spagnuolo. He disguises these. I feel like I watch a different defense every week. The way they disguise their coverages. I mean, one minute Justin Reed is dropping down, spying on a guy, and the next minute Trip McDuffie's there. It's really fascinating to watch. I know defensive football is maybe less entertaining to a lot of fans, but man, if you ever want to learn more about defensive side of this game, watch the Chiefs defense. Really get into it, because it's as good on that end of the ball as it is on the offensive, or can be on the offensive end. Yeah, I don't disagree. It's odd, isn't it? You would think that that it would be such an easy thing to kind of plug the hole in the gap, but it is not. And for whatever reason, maybe that's pursuit to the quarterback. Maybe that's the gap integrity that we do. I'm not really sure, because again, they disguise that so much. I mean, one minute you got Chris Jones in the middle, next minute he's on the edge, and maybe it's just the way they play with speed. They think, well, we'll have time to stop a big play, and you don't have that when they're only going 1 yard. I really don't know what the answer is, but you're right. It's frustrating. And a lot of times it does keep drives alive when all you want to do is get the other team off the field. And it seems like, 3rd and 1 is, I can kind of get, but it's the 3rd and 2s and 3s that drive me crazy. It's like that we should be able to stop. I don't know whether, maybe that's a good question to ask Coach Spagnuolo, to say, what do we need to change there? Or is that a concern for you? Because it is a little frustrating as a fan.
Dan, let's talk about the receivers. You mentioned Sky Moore. Tommy and I were together during the game, and I kept joking with him. I was like, "Oh, here's the Sky Moore game. Here's the Sky Moore game." Rashee Rice had another big play in the game. Is the progress there? Are you seeing the progress? Are you hearing that the progress is coming? Because it's not, necessarily translating in the box scores, but outside of the box scores, what are you seeing really from those two guys particularly? I guess Tony had a big play too. From those three, maybe.
Yeah, he did. I think with Sky Moore and Tony, no, I feel like the coaches have been saying it's coming, and we haven't really seen a progression to that until last week. With Rashee Rice, I do feel like he is progressing. I feel like he is getting more and more dependable. I feel like he is understanding now that plays don't necessarily end when you get to the end of your route, not with Patrick Mahomes back there. And so I feel like he's going to continue to be a guy that maybe can get you a score a game. And, if you can take a little of the load off Travis Kelce, that's quite a feat. At some point, I think you make him your number one receiver. But I feel like with MVS, I just don't know what to think with him. But with Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore in particular, we're waiting, man. Just bring it. I mean, at some point, we want to see it. And saw a little bit out of Sky Moore this week, and Tony did have the one good catch this week that I thought was impressive. And so maybe this is it. Maybe this is the start of that progression. But up to now, Jacob, you're right. I haven't really seen that.
All right, Dan. Well, look, enjoy Germany. It's awesome that you're still getting to hang out there for a little while. Drink all the beer, have all the fun, and enjoy the week off. We know these NFL seasons are insane, so glad you guys get the time, and we'll look forward to next week, looking ahead to Monday Night Football with Eagles and Chiefs.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one, but you're exactly right. I think the players, the coaches, all of us are just, hey, it's time for a bye, and it hits the right time of the year, man. But so we'll all suck it in, we'll all get some rest, and then it's back to Monday Night Football.
Well, I mean, I guess real quick, Dan, any updates, any inside info on how Trav and Taylor are going to spend a little time on the bye week here?
I don't. I thought it was interesting, though. There were a lot of people on the Taylor watch here in Germany. It's crazy, man.
Have we been letting the audience down that we haven't talked about that in like a month? Maybe we have.
You're not letting me down, that's for sure. But I do feel like, those guys probably deserve a little bit of privacy. So maybe they can get it this week. One thing I will say about Germany, it was incredible, the reception of people here in Germany. The amount of football knowledge they know is startling, man. Considering they really only get Sunday night and Monday night football games, and they come on at 10 p.m., you got to stay up to watch football here, but they're very knowledgeable. We talked to the concierge at our hotel who here in Heidelberg, who knew the Chiefs were in the AFC West. They knew they were in, Missouri and Kansas, and they knew quite a bit about the league itself and the players that play. It was phenomenal to watch in warm-ups. Travis Kelce caught a pass. Crowd went crazy. It's warm-ups, folks. He's going to catch a pass in warm-ups. I guarantee it. But they're really into football over here, man. So I would expect we're going to see these international games more and more. As Roger Goodell said, they're looking at Spain, they're looking at Brazil. Expect more of this every season.
No question about it. All right, Dan, thank you so much. Appreciate the time. Enjoy your time over there, and we'll talk next week.
Thanks, guys. Have a good week. Go Chiefs.
There goes Dan Israel, executive producer of the Chiefs Radio Network. We'll be back with him looking ahead to a big one next week. When we come back, Monday Night Football. Speaking of football, did the Chargers show us something in that game? Did the Jets show us something in that game? We'll talk about it next on Sports Daily. Sports Daily here on KFH. Glad to be with you, Albracht and Castor. We'll give away some movie tickets here before the end of the show. So, hang on for your opportunity to win those by calling in on the IHOP hotline at 869-1240, just in time for Thanksgiving. You can check out IHOP's home-style turkey and stuffing melt, which is a deliciously comforting melt with roast turkey, mayo, grilled onions, cornbread stuffing, mixed berry topping, and a 4-cheese blend, griddled with our multi-grain bread and served with turkey gravy and choice of side. Man, is it ever
amazing.
too early to start thinking about Thanksgiving? And we'll certainly get into this. I know we will, because it's always interesting when we get to closer to the holiday. I love Thanksgiving. I always have to work on Thanksgiving, and I will have to again this year. But man, it's are you a turkey? Are you an apologist, Tommy? Or have you, like so many people across the country, migrated away from the bird?
No, give me turkey all day long.
Yeah.
I'm like,
in what way do you take the turkey? Traditional? Have you ever?
Yeah.
You've had a deep fried turkey, I'm sure.
I have. I've had smoked turkey. That's pretty solid. I'm a fan of any kind of turkey you can give me. In fact, my favorite kind is the day after Thanksgiving turkey sandwich. That's got to be my favorite thing.
So our family back home, and we're never able to at HTO. It is the busiest week of the year. Like, my wife has PTSD. We're already working on it, dreading it. It's hard work, but that's because it's an awesome promo that happens at the store. So we haven't, like, the build up to Thanksgiving. Like, once we get to Thanksgiving Day, it's just sort of like, all right, where can we go pick up Thanksgiving from somewhere? That's what we've had to sort of switch our tradition to, is trying some restaurants and that stuff. Back home, though, they have switched to like prime rib, and they go like it, and it's like, and so you have that, and you're like, well, what are we eating turkey for here? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
But I'm as big into the sides, honestly, on Thanksgiving as I am the meat. I give me 84 pounds of mashed potatoes. Like that's for me. Like, give me good mashed potatoes, and I'm gonna be a happy camper on Thanksgiving. But
I could just take an entire casserole dish of stuffing. Just give me the thing of stuffing.
Guy.
Oh, I love stuffing. It's so good. And I don't understand why it's only like a Thanksgiving thing. Like, I could eat stuffing, and you can buy stovetop, at the grocery store 365 days a year. But for whatever reason, you only have it on Thanksgiving for the most part. But I could eat that stuff every day.
I don't love or hate stuffing. Indifferent would be my answer to stuffing. Like, I don't need cranberry sauce. Like, I would go ahead and say I can do without stuffing. I'm fine if it's there. I'm fine if it's not there. We'll get more into Thanksgiving. You know, we love food on this show. We'll get more into Thanksgiving food as we get closer. All right, let's talk Monday Night Football a bit here, Tommy, because it does feature two teams that are, in the mix of the postseason, certainly. The Chargers flex. You and I thought that they might. We're still in that mode with the Jets where it's just like, can they limp through and get there with a chance to get Rodgers under center? I thought it was interesting. Troy Aikman pointed out last night, he's like, look, I know everybody's waiting on Rodgers, but some of the things that are going on now, Rodgers wouldn't just step in immediately and fix all those problems. Zach Wilson threw it a ton last night. He wasn't good or bad, I didn't think. He completed a high percentage of the passes. You knew they'd have to throw it on the Chargers. The Chargers have one of the better run defenses in football. But what they didn't do for Zach Wilson, and what he didn't do very well, is feel the pressure. And it killed too many drives. They had some critical penalties on big Breece Hall plays. He had, I think, 2 big catches and a big run called back by penalty, which are just crippling. If you're the Jets and you're looking at it, like, that's what you can't have. You cannot have offensive penalties that pull back big plays. They can't overcome that. And so as those things happened, I thought it got away from them just a little bit. The Chargers didn't look very good on offense. That's the thing. Like, they had the special teams touchdown. But Justin Herbert was, ran into a top defense and he was not great at all. And they couldn't run the ball. And Austin Eckler, how many drops did Austin Eckler have to cost everybody a bunch of money in the props market last night? Me, and Breece Hall, by the way. Between Breece Hall's plays called back by penalty and Austin Eckler's drops, it cost me a lot of money last night, Tommy, in wins. I had them like parlayed into some props bets, but I don't know what to make of that game because the Chargers didn't play well and won convincingly. And I think that their defense is starting to come around a little bit. I think. And if that happens, they've got to be able to sustain all these injuries they've had at wide receiver. Like, can they overcome that? I don't know. It'll depend probably on the rookie Quentin Johnston. But, they've had just tons of injuries offensively this year, but the defense is kind of coming around, and I don't know how scary that makes them. They're just at 500. They're sort of a team that might limp into the playoffs and have a puncher's chance. Mike Williams won't come back. I assume Palmer can come back. I know Everett's been banged up a lot this year. Like, they're kind of out of guys. They're kind of out of guys to throw the ball to. But I don't know what to make of that game because I don't think the Chargers are as good as they looked, and I don't think the Jets are as bad as they looked by the score.
Well, you mentioned that Zach Wilson didn't do a great job of feeling the pressure. He had no time. He had literally no time to throw the football.
There were a few times there where he walked right into it. But yeah, the offensive line was no bueno there. The offensive line was certainly they allowed too much pressure, but he stepped right up into it several times, I thought. As we look at him play, he has gotten better this year. He has certainly gotten better this year, but he still, it's not totally. There was a crosser to Garrett Wilson late in the game that maybe could have gone for a touchdown, and he just totally botched the throw. But I think that he can get them there with a chance to go to the postseason. They're going to have to protect better on the line, though. If Aaron Rodgers steps in at quarterback at any point, and I think they said December is what he told them last night in the booth, Buck and Aikman. If Aaron Rodgers comes back and gets that sort of protection on the line, Tommy, that's kind of what got him in trouble in the first place. That's not going to go well either. They're going to have to be able to protect, or Rodgers isn't going to be able to do anything for them. So, I don't know what Jets fans should expect right now. Are they going to be able to figure it out enough to get there? And if they can, and if Rodgers comes back, will that be enough for them to be actual contenders? I want to say yes, because the story is so good. But I'm afraid it might be no, because when you watch the Chargers tee off on them like that, and you picture Rodgers back there at his age, Tommy, like even if he's back and the offensive line doesn't play well, that's sort of a recipe for disaster too.
Yeah, well, and wasn't that the big issue? Like even in week one, when he went down with that injury, was the offensive line was not good whatsoever. And, the fact that Zach Wilson threw the ball 49 times last night, Zach Wilson shouldn't throw the ball 29 times in a game, much less 49 times in a game. So that's just a recipe for the Jets to not have success at all. And I totally understand the whole thought process of, you've got to lean on the running game for the Jets, even though the fact that, the run defense for the Chargers is really solid. It didn't work out offensively for the Jets the way that it needed to, because again, they've got a very narrow path on what works offensively for them to have any kind of success.
I thought that the game plan for the Jets last night was fine. I'm telling you, if they don't have those big plays by Breece Hall called back, we're looking at a different outcome last night, because the Chargers weren't playing very well offensively, and the Jets shot themselves in the foot between sacks and those. It was at least 3 penalties on big Breece Hall plays. They just that little of a gap would have made did it end up being a 21-point game, like to maybe go in the other direction even. Like it was that, I thought it was that close. So very deceptive game. Chargers aren't 21 points better than the Jets. The Jets aren't 21 points worse than the Chargers. I think probably both of them sit right where we thought they were right coming into the game. I don't think either team did. The only outlier to that is that the Chargers defense is starting to play better now. And I don't know, Tommy, can they get enough with all the injuries they've had on offense? Like, are they going to be able to get enough back, do you think?
No,
they've
I don't think
lost
so.
a ton on offense.
I don't think so. I mean, even though you win by 3 touchdowns against the Jets, it's not like I magically think that the Chargers are, back to being the Chargers that, they could be, just because they've been, again, so decimated. Injury-wise, the defense has not been good overall up until the game last night. I still don't have a ton of confidence. Actually, I don't have any confidence in the Chargers and Brandon Staley whatsoever. I think they just ran up against a Jets team that, when you've got Zach Wilson starting at quarterback, there's just not a whole lot that you can do.
They gave up a lot to the Chiefs, right? But they did a pretty good job against Dallas, and then of course the Bears and the Jets are deceptive. That's the thing. Their defense is going to have to be good, but if they can keep stopping the run and get a pass rush, it'll help them. I'm afraid they just don't have enough on offense. I'm afraid they're not going to be able to, unless Quentin Johnston takes a huge step forward. And I still like Quentin Johnston as a prospect, but he's being asked to do a lot right now. You're down, and if Palmer comes back, that helps too. Certainly, Herbert likes Palmer, but here we go again with the Chargers. Just so many injuries they've got to try to deal with. I don't know. It was kind of a letdown last night. That game had a chance to be really good, but it was almost like mistakes were just, I don't know. And to be fair, I was watching a lot of college basketball last night too, but I do think that game let us down just a little bit last night. All right, let's get some giveaway going here, and let's do these movie tickets. So here's what's coming with the movie. We've got a sneak peek of the opening of the new Hunger Games movie, which is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. It'll be Thursday night of next week, November 16th at Boulevard Theaters in Town West Square. We got a pair of tickets for you. We'll get you a pair of tickets. I just got this book from the library. I'm excited to get into it. I think it's probably going to be pretty good. It's a prequel to the other Hunger Games movies. So you can check it out on us early next Thursday night, November 16th. We'll give away a pair of tickets to the second caller on the IHOP hotline going into the break here. 869-1240 is that number. Give us a call. We'll get you some movie tickets, and we'll come back with more Sports Daily right after this. Hey, Jad's already in the Christmas spirit, feeling generous. Got some Hunger Game tickets to 2 callers during the break. A little added bonus. Congratulations, Ken and Andre. Thanks for listening to us on Sports Daily. Thanks for watching us, too, by the way, on our video stream, which is available on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitch. Tommy's got a new background there, Tommy. We haven't talked about your what's going on in your life here. Congratulations, by the way. Tommy stepping up his role here with Odyssey Radio here recently. Why don't you tell folks about it?
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. So I left the Wichita Thunder, have nothing but great things to say about the organization and the front office and the team there, the people that I got to work with and all of that. But it was a great opportunity for me to come in to Odyssey. Of course, Odyssey is the company that we work for. The show Sports Daily is on KFH Radio, owned by Odyssey. So I'm looking forward to joining Odyssey full time. My first day with Odyssey is tomorrow. So I've had a couple of days off to just sort of hang out and get some things done that, my wife has asked me to do. So I'm looking forward to it. But getting a chance to work full time with Odyssey, and I can't wait.
It's going to be cool. We're happy for Tommy. And now he's going to be right there around. He'll have to mess with Jad a little bit in person sometimes. It'll be fun. We're excited about it. And
So my background, by the way, if you're watching the video stream, is my home office in my basement, but I don't have anything up on the walls like you've got behind you. So I need to kind of step that game up a little bit, I think.
You mean my smattering of crap behind me? Because like it's just a random, like it's like the things that I like, I just kind of piled onto a table. That's pretty much. I am not. I need help. My mother legitimately has a degree from the University of Houston in interior design, and I got none of that. So what happens for me is, I sort of walk in and I put something somewhere, and it just like will stay there for eternity. So a lot of this stuff is things I've just set down. I've got my Macho Man guy behind me. I got my Rafael Palmeiro bobblehead, an old signed Shocker basketball I won at a contest sometime, a picture of my grandpa. My kids' art projects are usually what I had. And I had a lot of experience at this, so it's a little bit different. I have another setup for a TV studio, because you remember when COVID happened, like I spent, I don't know how long it was, whatever that time warp was, like broadcasting from my basement. And we had to set up backgrounds and stuff, but my computer camera that we use for this stream faces a different direction. So I've got like this set up, and then there's another one over there that we were using for TV, also in my home office basement. But yeah, there's a couple Rangers bobbleheads, family picture, that kind of stuff. But I really like showing off my kids' art projects. That's probably what I will continue to do, is just add those behind me. And again, like in no design or order of anything. Tommy, real quick, this Michigan story, we haven't spent a ton of time on it, but it did have a little bit of an interesting wrinkle yesterday, maybe in defense a little bit of Mr. Harbaugh.
Yeah, so there was a story that broke yesterday about another Big Ten program that had allegedly stolen signs from Michigan, allegedly. I'm not exactly sure how all that plays out and how that relates to this actual story with Michigan and what they're investigating. But the big news this morning is that the Big Ten has informed Michigan that there will be a decision on disciplinary action coming soon. The interesting thing about this is that it's coming from the Big Ten. It's not coming from the NCAA. The Big Ten has informed Michigan that there may be disciplinary action relating to the sportsmanship clause in the Big Ten bylaws. What's interesting about this is that we're not looking at a potential team penalty. We're looking at a head coach penalty, where the Big Ten could suspend Jim Harbaugh for up to 2 games. What I find really interesting about this is the fact that we're mid-season. The investigation is nowhere near complete. But if the Big Ten is saying that they can levy punishment like right away, then you could potentially be punishing Jim Harbaugh and the Wolverines before any kind of investigation is even done.
What's interesting about that, though, is like in a lot of ways, the Big Ten could be punishing itself, because if Michigan's going to get into the CFP, and let's say they didn't get somebody in, that's going to cost them a ton of money. That's a tough spot for the Big Ten, because they do have to appease the other schools who are furious right now.
But also, don't you have to respect like due process and let Michigan go through the process of the investigation? It makes it kind of messy that it's happening in the middle of the season with the Michigan team that could potentially win a national championship. But like there is, I mean, shouldn't there be some kind of due process in this?
I mean, there's smoking guns. There's like, I don't know, because there's so many like things on camera, and we can't, it's hard to like knock the NCAA constantly for how long they take on things and then get mad at the Big Ten for acting decisively. I'm not sure I can do both of those things. Yeah. So like, if they have all of this very clear and simple evidence, then yes, I think they could hand down a punishment tomorrow. It's just like when you see a
2-game suspension. I mean, like that's kind of a slap on the wrist. I mean, I know that, right? I mean,
when do they play Ohio State?
Suspension.
When do they play Ohio State? Is that in the next 2 games? Because that would be, let me double check that. That would make it plenty hefty.
No, they don't play. So they don't play Ohio State until November 25th.
Okay, so that'd be 3 games. So but you are looking at the Penn State game on the road this weekend. So if they do it for 2 games starting right now, it would be.
But you better believe if that happens, like Michigan will try to do whatever they can legally to keep Jim Harbaugh on the sidelines. Like if they got to take it to court, Like, I would imagine they would take it to court to keep Jim Harbaugh
I think the
on
Big
the
Ten
sideline right away.
I think conferences have a whole lot of leeway to do whatever they want. I think because you see it right immediately on, court stormings or field stormings. Like if conferences step in to punish, it usually happens really, really quickly. So I can't imagine being the Big Ten decision makers, because Michigan's good enough to win a national championship this year. So you're gonna really hurt your league financially, potentially. But at the same time, you have other programs that are absolutely out of their minds mad about this. And then yesterday, you do hear an opposing coach of another school come forward and be like, "Hey, look, I was doing this for other people too. Like, not to the same degree. I don't want to downplay what's happening. What I can't, the electronic nature of some of this stuff, like, there are rules that you can take signs if somebody's willing to give them to you, right? But it's like the deceitful nature of it all. I don't know. I don't know where I've never had a good grasp of where this all ends. I just don't know. I don't know if if this is one of those like death penalty situations. Is this suspend a coach for? I don't know. I really don't have a solid take on it. I do know that it's really distracting and bad optics for the CFP to have Michigan in there, right? Far more so than the Big Ten. It would be the CFP that would potentially have to deal with Michigan getting in there, because that would instantly become a major distraction. It would be the top storyline of the CFP. They don't want that. They don't want that
Right.
at all.
Well, and what ends up making it really difficult for the CFP is that, on the one hand, I think that they would want to respect the investigative process and let everything play out before they make a decision. Ideally,
I
you
think
would
they
want
might
that to
say
happen.
that. I think they might
Ideally,
say
you would
that,
want
but
that.
I don't think they
You're-
want it. They don't
you
want the
don't
distraction.
necessarily. I get it, but you also you don't necessarily want to rush to judgment either.
They don't
And
have
then
to yet.
I know they've got some time, so they don't have to make any kind of definitive play right now on what happens with Michigan right this second. But I think the worst thing that could happen is that they don't do anything. And then in retrospect, what if Michigan wins the national championship? Then you've got all sorts of issues on, do we strip that from them? Is it a legitimate championship? All of that. I mean, like there are so many different potential issues that, and because of the fact that you're in season and you've got this involves a team that legitimately could win a national championship. But again, you kind of want, at least I would want, to let the process play out on the end of the investigation and all of that before you do anything, because you don't want to act too soon, but you don't want to act too late.
Here's a weird take for you. I don't know that there's ever been, like, if there's ever been anybody that didn't like the 4-team playoff, like this could be in this final year for the CFP, because if Michigan loses a game, they're not getting in that CFP.
Right.
So, like, if you're the CFP, you're like, God, thank God we only have 4 teams, because if they lost one, they'd still be in the top 8.
Yeah.
And
it could all be a moot
oh,
point
man.
if they lose to Penn State on Saturday. It could be a moot point if they lose to Ohio State. Like,
everybody,
there are a couple of
they'll
options.
never tell you that. They'll never tell you. But everybody in both the Big Ten and the CFP want Michigan to not make it, and either Penn State or Ohio State to make it.
It's just like when Kansas won the national championship in basketball in 2022, and you had Mark Emmert like, I don't really want to hand you the trophy, Bill Self, but I guess I will.
Yeah, that was awkward. Yeah, you don't, and this would be far more distracting than that. Like, not even on the same stratosphere of how distracting this would be. All right, we'll come back. We'll tell you what's on tap today with Sports Daily right after this. All right, welcome back, everybody. Albracht, Castor, Chambers, having fun on a Tuesday. Thanks for being with us today. You got Jim Rome, 11 to 2. Bob and Jeff here locally, 2 to 4. Zach Gelb takes you up until 6 o'clock when you get the Chiefs Kingdom show right here on KFH. I suspect that will be a pretty interesting one with the travel. That's 6 o'clock here tonight on the network. I think we're light of games tonight, Tommy. Yesterday was a whirlwind. Now I'm wishing we had college basketball tonight.
Well, you got some small college football, like Maction. I think like that is tonight. You can hang out with.
I'm not going to pretend like I care about that like some people do. I don't at all. All right, we'll come back. Looking forward to Wednesday. Kevin Saul will join us tomorrow. For Tommy, for Jad, I'm Jacob. We'll see you then.